Hello and welcome again, everybody, to another edition of Voices Interviews, part of Voices, a World Forum for Music Therapy. My name is Dr. Michael Viega, Communication Editor of Voices, and today we'll be interviewing Nicky Haire, author of her current article, Thinking Through Improvisation, How Arts-Based Reflexivity Can Offer New Knowing About Music Therapists' Experiences of Humor in Music Therapy. You can find this article in our current edition, Voices, Volume 21, Number 2, which can be found at voices.no. Author Nicky Haire is a doctoral research affiliate with the Institute of Music and Human and Social Development at the Reed School of Music at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. Her research focuses on the experiences of humor in music therapy, specifically with persons with dementia. In addition to practicing as a music therapist, she's a dynamic performer and has a particular interest in free improvisation, the process of empathetic improvisation in music therapy, and arts-based research methods. She is a lecturer on the MSc Music Therapy program at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. And without further ado, let's welcome author Nicky Haire. Hi, Nicky. How are you?
I'm really good. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. Thank you for being here. And I promise we will be serious during this whole interview. No joking. This is a serious, scholarly, academic conversation about research, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for respecting my wishes.
You're welcome. And I'm really excited about talking about this topic with you. I mean, of course, there's so many intersecting areas of interest. And, it's something I believe many music therapists can relate to, absolutely, this topic and the uniqueness of, you mentioned in your article how humor is kind of passed through a topic, as the topic gets passed through in many different articles, but yet to really contemplate it and sit with it for a while, and the complexities of both the contraindications and also how it's helpful is really, really beneficial. So let's just start because, you're of how you became interested, especially in relation to working with people with dementia, and how humor played a role in those experiences for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's sort of been there since I trained, really early on in my work as a music therapist. Like this question of, well, why? Like, what is it about humor that, it seems to be sort of everywhere, but why is it important and why haven't people looked at it? Like when I spoke to other music therapists, they'd get really excited about, oh, yeah. But then there didn't seem to be a huge amount of kind of sitting with, and that's sort of, in a way, that's the point, isn't it? Like as soon as you do that, you kind of take away from what humor can offer.
Yeah.
But in terms of music therapy, I think there were just so many moments where something like a spontaneous kind of humorous thing would happen, and it changed the way I felt. Like I would feel more present, or I would have a feeling of an increased sense of presence for the person I was with, specifically with people with dementia. So I kind of was interested in a sort of beyond words humor. And does it exist in the body, and how, and all these sort of questions which were far too big, but I was kind of interested in having a go at looking at them.
So humor as something more spontaneous and embodied, and surprises that happen in the therapeutic encounters that we have.
Yeah, in contrast to the sort of use of like the
tool
like the tool of it, and sort of, because you could, and then there are loads of instances of that as well. Like you're trying to get somebody to come along to a group, and you sort of make a little joke to ease them along the way, or something like that, or you start singing something and then you put a funny bit in. And there's a kind of very technical or intentional use of humor, but that didn't seem to have the same. That didn't have the same interest for me. It was these kind of
And this is what I really got. We'll come to that later, but you saying that really really enhances the performance video that you share, because it's through that improvisation and moments where it's the spontaneous laughter that you share as a group that comes up in the improvisation, where you're playful, and then humor pops in out of nowhere. That really brought that to life for me. But I digress, because we'll talk about that in relation to the research and check out some excerpts from it. But yeah, just talking about the research aspect of it and the methodology of it, you bring in many different elements. And so what is it like for you as a researcher to take a topic that is, as complex, but also personal, and also ambiguous in nature? How do you set off to actually get a structured design and figure out how to create space to explore this?
I really wanted to use myself, I think, without sounding like I know everything, but I really wanted to make use of my own responses and my own experiences of humor, so I immediately was in this kind of reflexive place, this self-reflexive place, which actually is not particularly funny. Do you know?
Yes, right.
It's sort of, it went a little bit introspective and serious at times, which was interesting in itself. But but in terms of the design, I wanted to use my own subjectivity, but I also wanted to make use of improvisation, and I kind of intentionally linked ways of being in humor and ways of being in improvisation, to try and see if I could surprise myself, Yeah. And the answer is sort of yes, if you're courageous enough. Yes, but I thought that would tell me something about how humor works.
Well, can you link that with the how you experience the stories of the participants as well, interviewing 9 music therapists, and with a beautiful opening question of, what brought you here, and because clearly there are stories to be told here. And what was your experience with their stories? Because some of the stories even, they were serious, it sounded like, and brought in some dynamics of where it's defensive and discomfort. And so how did you match those two worlds, like your experience with the participants' narratives and then the reflection of it?
A lot of what people said, music therapists in the focus groups, really resonated with my own experiences. And then there were these moments of frustration where people would talk about it as a tool or something that was very, considered. And it was a very collaborative process, but I think that the resulting improvisation allowed me to feel that in a way that I kind of in the moment wasn't maybe quite as conscious of. I think I had that slightly young researcher thing of, but tell me about that. Do you not mean this? Is it not about that? And sort of slightly leading, because I was enthusiastic or I had a certain feeling about, oh, well, it's not a tool. Or, so that was, but the performance, the improvisation helped me to just see that in a different way and to experience their stories in a different way. Because I think in the second focus group, there was, this real depth of sadness when a music therapist couldn't engage with somebody using humor. Like humor didn't seem to be there. And it was a real sort of, something was really missing for her. And then she had these experiences, these sort of almost I'm trying to think of the word, like overly peak experiences where you're sort of holding something which is a bit over joyful, maybe in a group, and you're not quite sure how to end that. And as a music therapist, you're sort of thinking, well, how do we come down? How do I facilitate a sort of, coming down from that, or do I need to, or is it my role, or, are we responsible for ending the humorous bubble? And what does that mean? But yeah, just quite powerful.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. So the arts as a way of really revealing the complexity of this topic, where, if we just talk about it, we might just talk about the functionality or the mechanisms of humor without really understanding the embodied aspects of why we use humor in everyday spontaneous interactions. It's really a remarkable aspect of the role of the arts in this research.
Yeah. That was my feeling, and I hadn't planned to do an improvisation. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I felt really led there by the voices and the data and the kind of, and the question. My question, I was sort of trying to get towards this: how do music therapists perceive and embody humor? I mean, it's a crazy question. Maybe how do we embody humor? I don't. But I was.
Yeah, I think it was how to explore music therapists' understandings of their experience of humor in music therapy without dampening it or dislocating it from an embodied and situated context.
Yes. That was it. And I thought a lot about, when I was setting up the focus groups, about having instruments, about improvising as part of the, as part of the focus groups. But I just thought, well, I couldn't see a way that we could, that I could say, look, we're thinking about humor, let's play. I think it just wouldn't, my feeling was it wouldn't have worked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, because it would feel contrived or.
Yeah. And people are like,
yeah, exactly.
And, you don't, it's yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So moving into each of the categories of the results in humor, and each one of these are just really distinct. It can be whole discussions in of themselves. I think the first one you start with, though, with one of the major themes coming out is improvisation, humor, and music therapy pedagogy, where you're talking about the participants discussing how training and the psychodynamic approach, where, where countertransference, transference, these are usually not funny topics. And if humor is discussed, it's seen as a pathological defensiveness towards like what's happening. And instead of it being an important resource, I think about, the stages of death, for instance, and how, humor might be seen as a denial, instead of humor being seen as, how amazing that in the face of great tragedy, we can still share a laugh together in the face of this, and that it's really beautiful. But instead, oftentimes we might be seen as like, well, you're not accepting the dying process. And so could you expand upon that? Because I think it's really important. It felt really important to me.
Yes, I think that's one of the, I'm really interested in that finding, because there was, and certainly with my own training as well, is that I think every music therapist that was in the focus groups, with the exception of one, had trained at a psychodynamically informed, course. And there was this sense, it came up quite often in each focus group, about that specifically in like experiential improvisational context, if humor was present, it was the interest was in what was behind it, well, instead of being in the moment and understanding it as not even something that's hugely positive or hugely negative, but just it was part of being. and so that is really interesting, I think, for me, in terms of, because I'm a little bit obsessed with improvisation and teaching improvisation, and how we teach students improvisation in music therapy, do you know, and what humor can do and how it links with that kind of, so that set me off a little bit, and it stayed with those music therapists, you know. That was a really formative experience in relation to their own perception of what humor is and what it can do or cannot do. There's a real nervousness around it because of those experiences. Yeah. And you know, who decides? Sorry.
No, yeah, keep going. Who decides?
Yeah, no, who decides in a music therapy situation? You know, who decides what the importance of humor, or what is humor? Do you know, it's. I think there's something about that, the psychodynamic approach, which is really being examined at the moment in terms of a knowledgeable expert person who knows what you're thinking or knows what you, do you know, which is really a bit suspect.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, us being the experts of what is happening in the unconscious and knowing.
Yeah, like how
really what's really going on underneath, you know.
Yes, let me just explain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it really sets up, you know, some of the other aspects of the themes that emerge, which is humor's role in relationship to like therapeutic and relational boundaries, and you know, and how we navigate that in terms of therapeutic boundaries. And humor, it can be very, very vulnerable, opening up in a way that and can reveal, because it can reveal so much of us in that moment. And surprising, jarring, you know, all these things that come up. So I was wondering if you could expand on some of those aspects that people talked about, distancing or being too close and immersed, and how you navigate those boundaries when relation to humor.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's not, it's difficult, you know. It's not a kind of there isn't a simple answer, is there? But you know, we had stories of music therapists, one in particular in the first focus group, being stuck in humor, like really being stuck in a place with the person she was working with, and not knowing how to enable or facilitate or get beyond. And I don't know if it was necessary to go beyond, but there was something that felt very stuck in terms of his just constant play with this person. But that person had agency within that playful humor, you know, which seemed quite important as well. But the music therapist just felt really, really frustrated. I think she felt she could see more or a deeper kind of relationship, you know, and she felt that that humor or the play was blocking it, you know, and these kind of jokes of hiding things and hiding instruments, and then or pretending, like a kind of pretending that, you know, she would say, I'm just going to go to the toilet, and the music therapist would say, oh, no, sorry, the music therapist would say, I'm just going to go to the toilet, and the person would then say, no, you're not, do you know, but even though she was not but joking, you know.
Yes,
yeah.
Did you hear similar stories with how therapists use humor as a way for them to distance or defensiveness? Or was it mostly about the other people they were working with?
It did come up. Therapists did use it as well. Like I'm thinking of, there's a music therapist in the second focus group who sort of occupied this this fool role. Like, you know, she kind of intentionally put herself in this fool. I'm the fool. You know, but actually she was really questioning. She was kind of wanting to come out of that role, and I think therapeutically she'd done it you know, she could justify why she'd done it, but there was something about not just being the fool for her that she was questioning.
It's
You
interesting
know,
because the more we talk about it, the more I try to tease out the humor as a tool or as a mechanism. You know, David Ramsey, music therapist in New York, his dissertation, working in pediatric hospital settings, had one of the music he discovered, looking at like the various roles he took on, and one of the roles he themed music therapy buffoon, that he would utilize that role. So, and I would find it within myself in pediatrics. The child's really scared and shy and nervous, and I walk into the room and I say hello, and then I pretend to trip over something, or I go achoo, oh my head, and they crack a little smile, and it's a little gateway, but you don't want to overuse it, as you know. And but so there is that kind of, you know, relational aspect of it being a mechanism in some way, where it's not, and it's got to be authentic too to who you are. You can't pretend to be the clown.
yeah.
But yet what you're talking about seems to be something more spontaneous, and people get into their head about humor as the tool, but you're talking about something that's relational and spontaneous and embodied, and those deep, you know, a deep laugh shared between two people in a moment that's healing and beneficial. So I mean, as you're talking, I'm getting really like, whoa, like it's all seems so intertwined.
It really is intertwined, and I think the toolness of it, I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about that, but actually the toolness of it is really important, because it is a gateway, you know, it does act as a kind of it can act as an opening and an icebreaker and a sort of easing and just enabling a breath, you know, especially with children, and also with people with dementia, you know, like just a little look. Or I remember once blowing the hair out of my eyes, and somebody who didn't use words anymore copied me, you know, and it set up this little, you know, it's like tiny nuance moment, but
Yeah.
it is both a tool and a spontaneous thing. And I don't even know if it's a thing. Like I had this whole discussion about this ontological sort of, what is it?
Right.
And you know, I was talking about it in terms of a phenomenon, a social phenomenon, but maybe it's a way of being, or maybe it's a kind of I don't know. Brynjolf Stiga has a lovely phrase which I've forgotten, but you know, maybe it's not quite as. I think I wanted to, in order to try and look at it, I had to do some sort of, well, it's a bit like this, or it's a kind of a bit like that thing, or this is its form in my head. But actually I wanted to look at what it the experiences of it beyond just that form. But I think for the music therapists I talked with, it was important that they started there, you know.
Well, I mean, with and we can, you know, transition. I would like to talk about the performance. So many things I wanted to talk about in relation to the article, but the performance again, and maybe we'll watch a clip of it. But you know, for me, it really spoke to the when you're talking about the embodiment of it versus this kind of the mechanics of it, that when it appears spontaneously and naturally, that it is a gateway into self in a way that it does, you know, it appears and is present in its being, and it's onto what's the fancy word I'm looking for? Ontology.
Ology.
Yeah, that it appears in a way that, yeah, is something else. It feels more self-oriented than
Yes.
therapist thinking oriented.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it. Like this kind of opening of the self. It is. There's definitely something that happens, I think.
And when we do it together, when it's spontaneous on your end and my end, now we have this unification of self that seems to me so powerful.
Yes, 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 yes. And I wrote about that in the other part of the PhD, where I was speaking with people with dementia and their music therapists together, and we kind of found this beautiful like an intrapersonal experience, but also an interpersonal experience was going on, you know, and it would have this kind of, specifically with people who had dementia, there would be, and it was kind of like music in the way that music can function in that way of you know, somebody that isn't using words anymore and they're perhaps not moving a lot, and when a certain familiar piece of music comes on, suddenly there's a brightness in the eyes, and there's, you know, singing and some sense of presence in a different way.
Yeah.
And humor was a bit like that, you know, in the sense that it certainly, for I think each of the people, there was 3 different people that I spoke with, that they suddenly had a kind of presence, a locating, humor had a locating kind of function,
Yeah.
which was quite surprising. And it would often come from nowhere. Like it was quite abstract sometimes.
Yes.
You know, and I was, you know, going with it, but surprised and delighted at the same time.
I think naming these subtle, very complex differences is really fantastic and so hugely important. It gives us a chance to really conceptualize, you know, as you say in your article, music therapists are say, you know, music therapy is fun, it's serious play, and these things we talk about, but you know, really getting into this. I want to just show a quick clip of the Humour Me improvisation performance that you did with your colleagues and what looks to be a cafe, definitely pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And afterwards ask you a few questions about it, but just to give some people an idea, and this can be found in a link to an excerpt, but a full performance. And I encourage everybody to watch the full performance because it's just filled with so many moments where you'll find yourself giggling and you'll find yourself going, what's going on here? What's happening? Are they connected? That guitar player looks serious. What? Look at that dance. Look at that movement. And then suddenly everybody's sharing a laugh. And so for me, it really brought out that embodied theme that you were mentioning.
There wasn't really a way in with humour. 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 There wasn't really a way in. There wasn't really a way in. Really a way in. There wasn't really a way in. There really wasn't. There wasn't really a way in. There wasn't really a way in. There wasn't really a way in. There wasn't really a way in.
How did this come about in relation? Can you talk about like how you got the colleagues together and how the performance kind of came about in relation to your research?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit by chance. I had this, I was organizing this symposium and I was going to present, I think I'd done the pilot. Yeah, I was going to present about the pilot and the study, and I was in the midst of analyzing or making sense of the focus groups, and I just had a real desire to do something like this, you know, like put what I was finding into improvisation. Yeah. So I went through this process, this real kind of distilling process of kind of getting towards the themes and then teasing out really one-liners from each of the focus groups. And I came up with this kind of poetic thing, but it wasn't meant to be. It was just supposed to be. Well, yeah, I called them catalysts, and that was really what it was supposed to be. And
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I got a bit. I was like, oh, that's what humor keeps doing. It just keeps, catalyzing something. And I knew I'd worked with each of these players before, but never in that group. And I sort of just handed them the catalyst to Sky, who's the poet, the performance poet there. And I've seen her work before, and I knew she would just take it and just do.
Know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, just go for it. And so I didn't tell the performers very much about it at all. I just said, look, this is, I'm going to give them to Sky and just respond, just go for it. Well, we've got about half an hour and we'll see what happens. And I also didn't tell the audience very much.
Awesome.
Although most of, I know, most of them had seen, I presented about it earlier in the day, and most of them had seen that. So they kind of they knew what I was doing, but they didn't know what I was doing.
Because all awkwardness and awkward silence can often be a catalyst for humor. Like
yes.
Uncomfortable laughing, that kind of humor is something that is very interesting, and it's part of it. It's not always like belly laugh. Oh, sometimes it's like, oh, what is happening right now?
Yeah, like that, like cinema dark, at the beginning, and someone starts sort of tittering, and you're like,
yes.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was really fascinating how, like, I don't know what the audience thought. And after, like, if I'd sort of planned this out and it had been part of the design, and I don't know if it could have been, there was something about the spontaneity of it which was necessary. But if I'd kind of known how important it would be, I think I would have loved to speak with the audience and speak with the performers and kind of take it further.
Yeah.
Because there was a sort of nervousness in the audience about, is this supposed to be really funny? Like,
exactly.
is it so, because I'm not sure if it is. In fact, I don't really know what I'm watching.
I keep being reminded of the Disney movie Finding Nemo, where you're a clownfish, so make us laugh. Actually, I don't know many jokes. Clownfish are funny.
Yeah. That's exactly how I felt a bit, But at the same time, watching it back, I loved that. Like, I loved that they didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really important, because it just, when they do laugh, when the audience do laugh, it's really proper. Yeah. And it kind of tells you something. But it was such a,
And I was fascinated with the guitar player, because he was jamming. I mean, he was finding these grooves and he was jamming. He was really responding to everybody else's movements. And then I just was like, I kept being like, all right, smile, and then he would laugh and I'd be like, ah. And then I would watch how that responded. And so like, it was like these characters in here all coming together. It was really, really fascinating. And I love that you added that aspect in there.
Yeah, I think for me it's the most exciting part, actually, and it's the part that just keeps going, oh yeah, we could do more with this, or this. Yes. This really means something. I think it's fine to have focus groups and analyze it, and thematic reflections, and come up with, kind of make sense of it in that way. But actually, when you're dealing with something which resists, which at the same time calls for definition, but resists it, exactly. Then do something that is going to do that, that's going to offer that, because it takes you closer. Yeah.
As you begin to analyze the themes, you move into your head and you start getting into the functionality and mechanisms about it again, and you start to disembody it.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'd be remiss without mentioning your co-researcher, Raymond MacDonald. And a shout out to Raymond, Dr. MacDonald out there. And Raymond, Dr. MacDonald's role, I'm calling him doctor. I'm not quite sure how we'd like to be referred to.
He might like professor, I don't know, or just Big Ray.
Thank you. Yeah, Big Ray. His role in the research and your relationship in relation to the writing.
Yeah, well, I would, funny thinking of that performance, because I could have easily invited him to play with us, but I decided not to, because he was my primary supervisor on the doctoral research, and he was great at kind of just letting me go and do it. So I don't think, I think I might have said, I'm going to try this, but we didn't sit down and plan it, or kind of, or really think in depth about it. I just said, I have this feeling and I think I need to follow it. And he was just, right, go for it. And Graham on the sax works a lot with Raymond. They collaborate a lot, Graham Wilson. And so he's sort of, Raymond's all through it, but he wasn't actually in the performance. And in the writing, he's just a pro researcher, and I'm kind of like, well, I think I want to say this, and he would say, well, you might want to say it like this, or have you thought about that?
A guide and support.
Absolutely.
Because I know our time is getting short, but I do want to ask about how this research was impacted with the pandemic, because after watching a video, I thought, right, here we now are working with older adults through Zoom, and that relationally, what that is like relationally, and how humor both plays a role, and how hard it is to convey that embodied humor experience. What did the role of COVID-19 and the pandemic play in you doing your PhD?
I was really, really lucky, because I'd done all my data collection and I'd been with whoever I needed to be with. So for the whole of the pandemic, I was writing up, and I was, trying to make sense of things, and so in a way it offered me a cave that I was needed anyway. But so I felt so lucky about that, and I stopped doing clinical work for that time. So I don't know, I haven't had experiences of being in humor. Well, I have, but just not with people with dementia, and not as a music therapist, but I know lots of people, lots of music therapists who have, and I know one lady who's not a music therapist, but she does the most fantastic musicking with older adults with dementia, and she's been doing it over the phone. And she sent me a picture of her, and she's like a little sprite. I hope she wouldn't mind me describing her like that, but she's very, very small, and probably in her 70s herself, and she plays the piano and does it over the phone. And she says you can still have these embodied affective dialogic experiences, and they're full of humor. So I think there's definitely the potential,
I really think about the importance of humor, as a gateway of a cathartic release to, right, like a reconnection to humanity and things that we, when we laugh again. In the United States, I remember after 9/11, there was a famous line on Saturday Night Live on the comedy sketch show where someone asked the producer, as they were doing their first show back, which was like a month later or something, someone asked, "Can we laugh again?" As permission, like, after these very intense international and global crises, that humor, the humor seems to be very fragile and important. So the work you're doing is hugely important, Nicky. So thank you.
Wow, thanks, Mike. I mean, that means a lot coming from you, but it's it was a bit of an exploration.
Is there anything we missed out on that you feel like you want to highlight before we say goodbye?
I don't think so. I mean, there's loads I'd love to chat with you about.
I could talk endlessly about this, but gotta contain.
I know, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
no, it's been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for taking this time, and thank you for all you've done. Thank you for watching another edition of Voices Interviews. Please join us again next time where we'll be talking with author Angela Schum about her interview with Dr. Doug Corlin, who will also be joining us to talk about his technique of music breathing, a modification of guided imagery and music. We'll see you then.